Okay, remember that they are changing my voice. This video is about my official stance on why the cloud that Christ is a character in the story, comes back on, is figurative. So Christ is a character in the story, comes back on a cloud, and it's figurative. I'm going to be using Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, which is key here, Job, and more, to prove definitively that the cloud is figurative, which will by default also show that the miracles in the Bible are also figurative, unless we're talking about martial arts and the miracle of God in certain ways. Not, walking on water was figurative, turning water to wine was figurative, etc. Okay, so in part 1 here, let us talk about Jeremiah 4:13, Jeremiah 13:24, and Jeremiah 23:19, and then we'll get into Ezekiel 38. So Jeremiah 4:13. Look, he advances like the clouds. His chariots come like a whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. Woe to us, we are ruined. So he advances like the clouds. His chariots come like a whirlwind. And his horses are swifter than eagles. He's advancing like the clouds. Now, keep in mind that in Revelation 19, it says, out of Christ's mouth is a sharp sword, a sharp double-edged sword. And we see that in Hebrews, the sword of Scripture is said to be sharper than a double-edged sword. So why is it being compared to a double-edged sword and being called the double-edged sword? That is a definitive example of a common formula used in the Bible where something that is compared to something is being said to be that something. We see the same thing with gold and silver, where gold is compared to wisdom and silver is compared to insight, and then time and time again, to refer to these things, we see the Bible saying their gold and silver is plundered, etc. So it is with the cloud. He advances like the clouds, his chariots come like a whirlwind. We see in Jeremiah 13:24, it says, I will scatter you like chaff driven before the desert wind. This is your lot, the portion I have decreed for you, declares the Lord. Because you've forgotten me and trusted in false gods, I will pull up your skirts over your face, that your shame may be seen, your adulteries and lustful nayings, your shameless prostitution. I have seen your detestable acts on the hills and in the field. Woe to you, Jerusalem, how long will you be unclean? So it's saying that they'll be scattered like chaff driven by the desert wind. And of course, clouds are moved by wind. So there's interpretations that have to do with the righteous warrior spirit of God, and there's also the wicked that God has allowed them to be handed over to. We get Jeremiah 22:22. The wind will drive all your shepherds away, and your allies will go into exile. Then you will be ashamed and disgraced because of all your wickedness. Again, the wind, which is being used here figuratively, right? It's not literally the wind driving them into exile. It is warrior spirits, the warrior spirit of God handing them over to their enemies, what have you. We see in Jeremiah 23:19, it says, see, the storm of the Lord will burst out in wrath, a whirlwind swirling down on the heads of the wicked. So it's the storm of the Lord bursting out in wrath. And it says it's a whirlwind swirling down the heads of the wicked. The storm is more than the whirlwind, right? But then they zoom in on the whirlwind. And the storm is figurative. It is the vengeance of the Lord. It isn't some kind of literal storm. So you see all those scriptures, right? where Jeremiah 4:13, Jeremiah 13:24 through 27, Jeremiah 22:22, Jeremiah 23:19. I know I threw in one more there, but it's okay. I'm sure you're keeping up with me. If you don't, watch it over again. Watch the first 5 minutes over again, and you'll understand to that degree. Okay. Now, with that being said, let us go to Ezekiel 38, and we're going to put this in context in part 2, as well as going over Isaiah 30. And we're going to see how those two are connected. Let's go down to verse 9, okay? Maybe there's a few verses around it, and then we'll get to verse 15 and 16, and maybe some other verses around it. Okay, so Ezekiel 38, verse 9. You and all your troops and the many nations with you will go up advancing like a storm. So again, the troops are advancing like a storm. The troops are the storm. We'll get to that. You will be, the troops are part of the storm, right? And it's God's allowing it to happen. You and all your troops and the many nations with you will go up advancing like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme, kind of like a dark cloud over their head, right? You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. And I'm sure you all remember all the people in popular culture talking about Gog and Magog. Ezekiel 38 is titled, The Lord's Great Victory Over the Nations. It starts off by saying, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him. The wordplay there is interesting, but we won't get into that in this one. Now, you see that Gog and Magog's in Revelation, right? They surround the righteous of God. Okay? So what's happening is the cloud and the storm represent God going to war with people, and he's dividing them against each other. And in the spiritual realm, the top martial artist and the righteous in the spiritual realm, and anyone who rallies to him in their souls, if they rally to him in their spirits, merge with God's spirit. They're gathered into the clouds, and they trample them. And these people suffer in this world, in their pitiful lives. We see that in Jeremiah, at the end of Jeremiah, and they suffer in the afterlife as well. And that's what Revelation is about. So again, the next verse says, I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins, and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock, living at the center of the land. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hoards to loot? To carry off silver and gold? To take away livestock and goods and to seize much plunder? Okay, now this is key here, right? They're there to try to seize their goods. And it has to do with wisdom and insight, who valued what and why, who sought refuge where and why. I'm almost out of time, so let me just get to 15 and 16 and wrap this up here. Okay, verse 15. You will come from your place in the far north, you and many nations with you, all of them riding on horses, a great horde, a mighty army, right? Babylon's system, Gog and Magog, the global system of these idolaters. You advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. So you will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. Okay? In days to come, Gog, I will bring you against my land so the nations may know me when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. Listen to verse 17 very carefully. This is what the sovereign Lord says. You are the one I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel. It said, you are the one I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophet of Israel. So the different prophets in the Bible are saying what's going to happen. And in Revelation, it's using figurative speech to refer to certain things here. They're using the words the storm. They're using the cloud. Okay, what have you. Okay, an earthquake. Later on in this verse, it talks about an earthquake and hailstones. And these things are spoken of in Revelation, and mountain, and so on and so forth. Okay. So in verse 19, in my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel.